Hello folks, I'm boots on the ground journalist Tommy G, and this is a flock camera. And you may have noticed cameras like this popping up around your city.
Tommy G went looking for America's mass surveillance problem, and honestly, he found one.
Former Milwaukee police officer pled guilty to using the flock camera system. Police say he used it to track a romantic partner and friend.
Police officers have been caught using flock cameras to track women they were involved with. Innocent people have reportedly ended up staring down police officers because of bad information. And these cameras are appearing in communities all across America.
Hi, I'm Ben Jordan, a researcher and journalist. As of today, Flock Safety has installed over 100,000 cameras all over America, so chances are that Flock is in your city even if you don't know it.
But while I watched Tommy's investigation, I realized something. He may have been looking at the wrong thing.
That's right, today we're gonna spy on flock employees to see how they like being under surveillance.
He was looking at maybe this camera, that camera. That's not what concerns me the most about this. What does? Just imagine this. I type in your license plate into a computer, and instead of seeing one picture of your car, I start connecting dots. You left home, you went to work, you stopped at the doctor's office, you went to church, you visited somebody across town. Maybe you went somewhere you don't want anybody to know about. Now imagine the person searching that information isn't investigating you for a crime. Maybe he's curious. Maybe he's jealous. Maybe he knows your wife. Maybe he's your ex-boyfriend. And here's where Tommy's investigation gets really interesting, because officers have already been caught abusing systems like this.
To cover how flock cameras have the potential to be abused, I have to look no further than my city of Milwaukee, where police officer Josue Ayala obsessively used flock 180 times over a 2-month span to stalk his ex-girlfriend. And in McHenry County, Illinois, where I grew up, the same story played out where a police chief used flock to creep on 3 separate exes and was later charged with multiple felonies. And there are countless stories like this.
For example, earlier this year in Florida, a sheriff who was working a side security job for a film set started hitting on an actress and repeatedly approached her even after she told him that she had a boyfriend. Other extras on the set noticed this and intervened, so he used the police database to find her vehicle's information and added it to the hot list so he would be notified every single time that she passed a flock camera. He then followed her for miles and then pulled her over, telling her that he had hoped her boyfriend was with her so he could give him a hard time. He then allegedly used the police department's investigative tools to find her on Instagram and continue stalking her there.
But this isn't the biggest part of the story. The biggest question is why nobody stopped them sooner. And once you understand that, the entire flock debate changes. Because this isn't really a story about cameras, it's a story about power. Who gets it, who watches the people using it, and what happens when the computer's wrong.
This is the Hill of Justice.
So welcome back to the Hill of Justice. I'm Jerome Hill, former investigator, and with me is retired Sheriff Victor Hill. And what we're going to do is investigate the investigation. So, brother, you have a little bit of experience with the flock system because it was instituted back in 2017, and its full implementation with 5,000 of them flooded Atlanta and so on and so forth. What are some of your impressions right off the bat, and in particular, what was your experience with it?
Well, first of all, it's an amazing piece of equipment, and it can do a lot for law enforcement. You know, imagine you get a description of a car or a tag, but, you know, you got to look out for it. But the only thing you can depend on is if officers that have that lookout spot the vehicle, or perhaps you're able to get it out to the public and they say they spot it. But imagine you got well-positioned cameras, so you can basically track the direction that this car is going in and then get a picture of it in time. So if you're talking about tracking a stolen car, looking for a child that's been kidnapped or something like that, amazing technology. But everything is a two-edged sword. You know, everything has a yin and yang to it, for lack of a better term. You know, a knife can be used to cut meat and prepare a meal. It also can be used to stab a person to death. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so you got this amazing tool that when it's used for what it's intended to, just like a knife or just like a firearm, it can protect, it can provide food. And just like this flock camera can provide protection. But if it's used wrong, it becomes a very, very dangerous situation. What's interesting, we've had about 5 or 6 officers locked up in the last 30 days in Georgia for misusing a flock camera. So it's starting to gain attention. And interesting, we'll get to my county in a second because that's a whole different story of what's coming up there that you're going to find interesting. But what's so interesting about these officers and how they're using it is, okay, it's already against the law to do what we refer to as a chick check. Meaning officers used to see a pretty girl, run a tag, that way they know where she lives. And they would literally go by the house. Hey, I just wanted to meet you or whatever like that. Of course, that got ridiculous. There was complaints. And of course, laws were created that tag can only be ran for investigative purposes only. And to use it for anything else is illegal. So officers are trained that when they go through the academy, when they come on, that information is to be accessed only for investigative purposes. There should be a case number. There's a reason I'm running that tag. It's not because I want to see if someone's married or not, or I want to see where they live. So common sense should dictate that if you can't run a tag to see who it belongs to, what makes you think you can put your girlfriend, your wife, or whoever it is you're trying to stalk, because that's exactly what it is, stalking, so you can see their whereabouts. Now, think how scary that is. Okay, first of all, stalking is an issue anyway. But now you're being stalked by a law enforcement official, someone who has access to information, that the only people who should have access to that information is people who are trusted with integrity to use that information for good, not for evil. But now you got a jealous boyfriend. And let's not just say it that way. I mean, they're jealous females. I read an incident about a female that was tracking her husband using Flock. She's the officer. But imagine you got somebody and they're watching everywhere you go. Okay. Right. And then they're law enforcement. They carry a badge and a gun. That's taking stalking to a whole nother level.
Sure. And first, Tommy got something very right. And before anybody says I'm defending flock safety, I'm not. And before anyone says I'm attacking Tommy G, I'm not doing that either. Tommy raised a legitimate issue. He showed examples of law enforcement officers allegedly or criminally using the investigative technology for these purposes. One officer reportedly searched for information connected to a former romantic partner over and over again, something that you just mentioned. Another disturbing example involved allegations that an officer used law enforcement resources to monitor a woman he had became interested in. No good. That's no good. So that should bother you, and it should bother the audience out there. I know it bothered me. And I spent years in law enforcement and investigations, and the one thing you learn very quickly is this: access is power. Police databases contain information ordinary citizens cannot simply have. Right. But this is where we're at. And so there has to be some rules. But Tommy, what he did was he makes a jump that I wouldn't have made as an investigator. He essentially asks, look at what this technology allows people to do. My question is a little bit different. Who was supposed to catch them doing it? That's the question. Hold on to that question because we're going to come back to that a little bit later in the show. But first, there's another part of Tommy's video that sounds even more frightening if you look at it until you separate the two things that aren't quite the same. And this is where we're at right now. A camera seeing you isn't the same as someone following you. And I know you were talking about stalking, but it's a tool that's necessary. I mean, wouldn't you say something like that?
Yes, I mean, it's an important part of investigations. What interests me about Flock and where I'd like to see it ultimately go, and that's what they're working on now, is when you can chase a car with Flock. So imagine you're no longer chasing a car with a police car and putting them off the road and putting everybody's life in danger. You can track a car with Flock. You have enough cameras where there's no way they can go where you're not tracking where they're going. And they're working on connecting that to drone technology. So imagine you got drone with the tracking information, and that drone is able to lock in on that vehicle. So that's safe for everybody. So now you don't have a police car and another car going, two-ton bullets going through the crowd. But it's going to make it impossible for this criminal to get away, because once they lock in, we're going to know where they're at. So when you look at that, the potential and the greatness for this to help society is great. But when you got these rogue individuals that have these issues, because, you know, if it's that serious that you got to know where this person is and what they're doing, you're a stalker.
Right. Right.
You're no different than the people that we get reports on that's driving past their wife's house or putting tracking devices in their car. What's the difference?
Right. Right. I think that when we take a look at this, some critics will go ahead and talk like photographing a license plate in public automatically equals an unconstitutional search. And I think that's too simplistic in nature. But I've also heard that law enforcement people essentially say, you're outside, you have no privacy, you know, or you don't have no expectation of privacy.
You don't.
And we can see whatever we want. And I think that's too simple too, in a sense, because example, you're in your home, you're in your backyard, you know, you're supposed to have some type of cover. You're walking around naked, and so guess what? Somebody is on a scaffold that you wouldn't think that they would be up there. They see you, they call, and then you got another set of issues. Or a flock sees you because they're high up in the ground. So I could see, you know, some unconstitutional. I mean, I could see some constitutional fights coming, and we had some even just last month. I'll go ahead and talk about later. So. We have those issues.
But, you know, it's a simple fix. The way you fix this problem is the same thing you do for this is what you did. Remember, it wasn't just people checking tags. It was criminal history. Mm-hmm. Remember, an officer could run anybody's criminal history. So you got a friend, and she's like, hey, I'm dating this guy. Can you run his background so I can know what's going on? And that was going on. Mm-hmm. And then she confronts the guy she's dating. So, well, I heard you were arrested. How do you know that? Well, I got a friend. He's a cop or whatever. And they had to put a stop to that. So now this is how they did it. Not only is it illegal to run a person, but here's how you control it. When you run a person's background, you have to give the reason for it and a case number. That way you can look up the case number and see the documentation and see this is why. So if you have a case number and you know that you're investigating a robbery at this location and you know these particular people are suspects, then it proves this is why you ran these people's names, because you had a robbery, and in the course of the investigation, these people fit the description. You ran their criminal background. So everything is documented. Mm-hmm. So anytime you put a tag in a flock, it should be going with a case number, because, hey, a case number that says a car was just stolen or there was just a kidnapping or whatever. And that information is going in as you're putting it in. So that way, when a person goes back and audit, this tag was put in for this reason. It can't be something that's just in your phone. And, you know, like what we got going on in Clayton County now, where because you're the elected sheriff, you want it in your phone so you can check whoever you want whenever you want to. That shouldn't be the case. Every time you put a tag in there, you should be able to prove why you put that tag in there. Yeah, and that solves the problem right there.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because let's just imagine this happening to you. I'm gonna give you a scenario, okay? Mm-hmm. You're driving home and you haven't committed a crime. Suddenly, you got police lights behind you. 2 officers get right out, and another unit arrives. Maybe somebody orders you out of the car. Maybe guns come out, and you're thinking, "What the heck did I do?" You know, and you're trying to figure out what the answer is. A computer said your vehicle was a match. And Tommy showed examples involving these innocent people being confronted and problematic with this problematic automated system that they got going on. And those cases absolutely deserve scrutiny. But as I'm thinking about it as an investigator, I'm not just stopping right there, because here's the missing part between the computer alert and a person in handcuffs. And it is what happened between that time. Who checked? A little bit what you were talking about. That's the part that I want to find out, because honestly, computers don't put handcuffs on people. Police officers do. Somebody had to check that. Where's the supervision on that? And that's a little bit what you're trying to get at too. And what happens next when you find out that, oops, you made a mistake?
Well, let me tell you, that's the crazy part about police work. When a secretary makes a mistake, she can use whiteout or she can hit backspace or whatever. But we're in a different realm. When we make a mistake, it's very, very different. And there's going to be human error. I was stopped by cops with a felony stop because the tag on my car came back that I was wanted for attempted murder. So imagine I'm a police officer when this happened. This is years ago. I was a young rookie and I'm driving down Candler Road and a cop car gets behind me. Next thing you look, there's a felony stop. So I'm complying. And fortunately, one of the cops came up, recognized the car, recognized me and said, "Hey, wait a second. This guy's a cop." And the rest were like, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah." So I remember he said, "Hey, get out the car, show me your ID." So the other cop was complex and he was like, "Hey, is your full name Victor Hill?" "Yes." He said, "Is your date of birth this?" "Yes." "Do you live at this address?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Hold on." He went back and he came back and he said, "Listen, I don't know how to tell you this, but I got a warrant for you for aggravated assault, which is the equivalent of attempted murder in Georgia." And he said, "Have you been involved in any use of force incidents?" And I said, "Yes, but it was cleared. So there's no way they would have taken a warrant from me. And if they did, I'm sure they would have told me or whatever." And he said, "Look, I don't know. Listen, I'm not trying to be rude, but right now I got to take your gun and I'm not going to handcuff you, but you got to sit in the back of the car until we can figure out what's going on." So they're perplexed. I'm perplexed. Now I'm sitting in the back of the police car and I'm like, where and how did I get a warrant for me for aggravated assault? Now this is in the 90s.
Right.
So they got a computer in the car. So I reach over and look at the computer and I'm reading it. And sure enough, all my information is there. And then I saw something. I realized what happened. When I looked at the case number, there wasn't a case number. It said test. Back then, when they used to train officers for GCIC, they would have us enter ourselves into the computer. Then they would have us take a command and take ourselves off the computer. Obviously, I didn't hit the right command. So I was wanted all over the United States for attempted murder. When they went back and did an audit, there were like 5 other officers at my agency that was also wanted for attempted murder. So they had to change that policy. Okay, we're not going to train anybody by actually having them input their name into the system and take it out. And there's a lot to be learned from that because you imagine if you're a cop, you got people telling you there's a warrant for you. And that's why I always tell people, don't argue with cops, don't fight cops, don't run from cops. Because it doesn't make any sense. I could have said, "I'm not getting in the back of the car. You're not getting my gun. I don't know what you're talking about. Get your hands off of me." It's like, well, hey, look, let's figure it out. Calm, cool. What purpose would it serve? If I started fighting the cops because, hey, y'all know I'm not wanted or that type of mentality, somebody could have got hurt. What would it have solved? It would have made a bad situation worse.
Right. And I love that story because, you're talking about a principle that I learned long ago. And that was technology should assist in an investigation. And, thankfully, those 2 officers had a cool heads on their shoulders. And they went about investigating. And they didn't use the substitute of the technology to say this was a done deal, And
Right.
obviously, you understanding what happened, went a long way in that case, in that investigation. So that says a lot. But it only takes one character, of typing something and boom, you're in the
And boom.
jackpot. And so, that's why, you still got to be an investigator. You still got to go ahead and take a look at things. I remember, in my agency where the same person had the same name and date of birth and so on and so forth. But the height difference was so enormous. The weight difference was so enormous. The officer took him in anyway. And I was so uncomfortable with it. I was just like, that can't be the guy. And sure enough, when he went down there to booking, wasn't the guy, that was his arrest. That ain't me. So I don't know if he was ever got sued on that, but this is problematic where you can take a look and you need to verify, and officers need to verify in these type of situations, and because you don't want this to escalate to something, tragic.
And exactly. And if you're the victim of that, you got to remain calm and cool. Again, no one has ever shown where arguing with the police, fighting the police, or running from the police was the best course of action. I know in the end, well, I was scared. well, I was right or whatever. There's going to be a lot of circumstances where you're right, but it's kind of like our dad used to say about that tombstone that says, "Here lies a man that had the right of way." You know what I'm saying? A tractor trailer's coming, you got the right of way. Well, I got the right of way. I'm going to pull in front of it anyway. Okay, well, the car's crushed, you're dead. What difference does it make? So these things are going to happen. It's real important that you remain calm and cool until it's over with. I've never seen a situation where arguing with cops, running from cops, or fighting cops is the best option. And we've got to, I would say teach our kids. We need to teach our adults that, because you see it every day where people think, let's argue, let's do whatever. There's a lot of camera technology out there. They're filming everything. If they got camcorders, you can film everything, and you can get your day in court or your day with internal affairs. But arguing, fighting, and running from the cops is never a viable option.
Right. And we know that people misuse the criminal history databases. They misuse the driver's license database. They misuse even the confidential governmental information. What the real question needs to be is how long they can get away with it. Because if you imagine this, an officer searches one plate connected to a robber. That's normal, right? Then another connected to a stolen vehicle. That's normal. Then another to a missing person. Also normal. Now imagine that same officer searches one woman's vehicle again and again and again. So, 50 times, 100 times. At what point does somebody ask, why is this officer obsessed with just one vehicle? And it's not part of any type of drug interdiction or something like that. There's got to be some parameters that, flock safety has to acknowledge personally, to say, hey, guess what? There's still some glitches, and a lot of it is human error and human misuse.
Absolutely. And I think law enforcement leaders are going to have to assign people to do monthly audits,
right,
to catch that type of stuff. It's kind of like at the jail. If you run a jail, one thing you can do in order to catch things is, you require all your employees to give their home and cell phone numbers. But every so often you run those numbers through the phone system to see if an inmate is actually calling one of those numbers, and if they're actually having conversations with employees, because they should not be. Now, of course, you're going to find people on trying to get throwaway phones or whatever, but all those phone calls are recorded anyway. So it's very important to audit those phone calls and listen to see exactly what's going on, to do your internal affairs audit, for lack of a better term. And with Flock, that's going to have to be mandatory, because that's very scary to think that you are involved with someone that can track everywhere you go every day, and something that they don't have a legal right to do.
Right.
But everything is a rises and fall, and is a reflection of leadership. And where the leadership is strong, and where they have checks and balances, and they're consistent with discipline, then you don't see stuff like that. Take, for instance, in Georgia, let me give you a good example. So at least 5 officers have been locked up in the last 30 or 40 days for misusing Flock. Richmond County, I believe it's Canton, Georgia. Forgive me if I'm wrong with that one. And some other jurisdictions. But right in my county, in Clayton County, there's an officer who's on record for using Flock, checking the tag of his girlfriend 100 times. He has not been prosecuted. Nothing has happened to him. And there's only one logical reason. And that's because the sheriff probably can't prosecute him, because we got good reason to believe that the sheriff does the same thing. He actually has Flock on his phone. So no doubt, if there's an audit, you're going to see the sheriff check in for females' tags as well, too. There's no doubt in my mind. And I've had some interesting conversations with people who feel they may have been a victim of that, and are wondering what can they do. And, and let's discuss that real quick. If you believe that you're a victim of being stalked by Flock, for lack of a better term, there's two things you can do. Well, number one, with that agency, you should be able to file a report with Internal Affairs. But in a situation like this, what if it's the actual sheriff, the head of the agency that's using Flock? Well, that gets very, very interesting too. Now, Georgia is a unique circumstance because, unfortunately, citizens can't just go to the GBI. When the GBI was created, some strange things were put in the law that only a chief of police, a chief judge, or the sheriff can request a GBI to come and investigate. So basically, if you got a situation where it's a sheriff, you would have to actually go to a city police or county police if you have one, and file a report. Hopefully, that's within the jurisdiction, which most of the time it will be, especially if it's a county police, and see if you could get them to get their chief to ask the GBI to come in and make some type of report. So that's a very unique situation we're dealing with in Clayton County, because you got one guy checking 100 times, but the leader refuses to have him prosecuted because it can lead back to him. But what when it's a leader? I mean, who do you complain to when the sheriff is stalking you on Flock? He's an elected official.
Right. Well, it's a civil rights violation.
Absolutely.
And that can be federal.
Well, that's good to know, because that's what I was going to say next. If there's some type of federal statute or whatever like that, then you no doubt have to contact the feds to come in. Because like I said, there's this little quirk in the law, at least in Georgia. I don't know if every state is like that. Different states have, South Carolina has SLED, Tennessee has a TBI. I don't know if they have that quirk in the law like we have in Georgia, where only the chief, the sheriff, or the chief superior court judge can call them in and ask them to come and investigate. But if they do, you're absolutely right. That would be the next step.
Right. And then just piggybacking off of you, anyone out there in Hell Nation, if you feel the same way, please feel free and even comment and put it in the comments below. So we like to hear from you, and certainly maybe your interactions or what you dealt with law enforcement, or what do you feel about the situation. I do feel like the Flock safety system or Flock safety has an apparatus, and that apparatus, although it's pointing at, the citizens, I also feel like that is the same apparatus that can be used internally for accountability. It's an accountability tool, and
Absolutely.
it can be pushed right back on that company. And that's what it should be doing. I know that this is going to sound weird. I do believe that there's some uncomfortability with police departments, and they push back a little bit because what you just described, because people are abusing the system and they don't want that type of civil exposure, if you will. And thus they would rather look away or try to sweep it under the rug and or deal with it internally than have that exposed to the public.
Right. In the state of Georgia, the GBI does GCI audits. There's NCI, GCI. GCI is a Georgia Crime Information Center. And they do these audits, and they come and audit agencies to see how GCI make sure it's being used properly. And I believe that there needs to be legislation so that they can also audit the Flock system, because technically the Flock system has to connect to GCIC, NCIC in a way anyway in order to have information. Mm-hmm. So that's going to have to, I think there should be, and I don't even know if an annual audit is enough, because you're talking extra manpower, but it's worth it. It probably needs to be biannual or maybe even quarterly to be safe. Mm-hmm. I would push towards a quarterly audit of something like that to make absolutely sure.
And maybe some alerts in there if
some alerts, absolutely,
like unusual search behaviors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because there are people you'd be amazed at how outraged they become if they think they have a spouse cheating on them or something like that. These type of problems have been going on with technology for a while. We had a former police chief, if you want to call him that, and he actually took a tracking device from narcotics and put it on his wife's car. Now, of course, that's designed to track drug dealers, and you can't just put a tracking device on a person's car. You got to have a court order.
Yes.
But he actually put one on his wife's car so he could keep up with her to see what she was doing. So this phenomena is not new. It's just the technology is a different and new technology. And I'm sure he's not the only one to do that. And he went without being prosecuted, which he should have been prosecuted. But, but again, there's a lot of selective and political prosecution. One guy can do something and not be prosecuted. Another guy, well, we're going to prosecute that particular person, and which is an inconsistency in the court system and a whole nother show we'll talk about. But we've seen this before. It's just now it's with a different technology and an easier to use technology. Now you don't have to actually put something in a glove compartment or stick something under the car with a magnet. Now all you got to do is just have the tag number of who you want to track and put it in and on your phone. If you connect it to your phone, you can see exactly where someone's going.
Right. And, we talked a lot about the girlfriends, the boyfriends, and so on and so forth. But, it's a dangerous tool because you can use it to go ahead and track journalists, city council members,
Absolutely.
Political opponents. It can get dicey in there.
Yes.
And who conducts the audit on that end of it is the other dicey part of this, because you're basically telling the public, don't worry, every search is logged. I don't think that's enough. You just can't just say, hey, guess what, it's logged. Well, just like the case you just brought up, 100 times on the same person, I mean, that's ridiculous. A security camera records the front door of a bank. That's useful. But if nobody ever watches the footage after a robbery, what good is the camera?
We got one better than that. When you got cameras like at the courthouse, if no one's watching the cameras all the time, what good is that other than, well, we recorded what happened? Someone needs to constantly watch it to say, hey, there's a problem here. Hey, check this guy. It looks like he has a weapon or something like that.
Right.
So you're right. But like I said, with the real problem comes is this. Let's say you're a woman and you feel that you're being checked on flock by someone at the sheriff's office. Well, you should be able to go to the sheriff and say, Sheriff, I think I'm being checked on flock by one of your deputies. And he should be able to tell you, okay, go see my internal affairs. I'm going to have him come down there. We're going to look into it. We'll get to the bottom of it. But again, what if it's the sheriff himself that's checking flock, that's checking his wife, that's checking his side pieces or whatever? And that's the situation we got in Clayton County with the sheriff who's there now. So think about that. So, there has to be things put in place. I think it's better if the state comes in and audits every agency periodically. And then also there has to be mechanisms where if someone makes a complaint, they can instantly, put their tag in and see if it's being ran, if it's being ran by who and why, and is there a case number, and is there an actual legitimate investigation going on with it?
Correct. And I think that, that type of audit is what we need to do, because an audit trail without an audit is decoration, basically.
Absolutely.
And so, these parameters should already be in people's general orders already. When you use a technology, you have to go ahead and take a look at what the blind spots are.
Right.
And develop policies for thinking people need to develop these policies so they can go ahead and try to shift out certain things before it happens. And you're not going to catch everything, because every situation can be unique and challenge the narrative. But let's just say, let's just say this. Okay, let me give you another scenario. Let's just say your city installs 50 cameras.
Yeah.
And you might think, okay, my local police department has 50 cameras. But what happens if the information is shared through a larger law enforcement network? Now, the question changes there. It's no longer just, can my police department search this? It's who else can? Another city, another county, another
exactly.
state.
In order for it to really work, there's just interdepartmental agreements with other agencies to give access, because especially take an area like Atlanta. We got right in the Atlanta metro area is made up of 5 big counties and then some other counties. Actually, 11 counties make up the Atlanta metro area. And it's easy to pass from one jurisdiction to another. So in order for Flock to be effective, you've got to have access, because you can easily start looking or chasing a car and you're already in another county or another city. So in order for it to be effective, it can't just be there. So every agency needs to come under the same umbrella. And I think probably
Correct.
the best way for this to work is for the state to do audits on flocks, on the flock camera, to see who's accessing it and why. It's one thing to get an alert on flock. The beautiful thing about flock is this: okay, a tag comes up stolen. The tag's there, flock sees it. So that means people should be alert. And really, if flock is used correctly and there's enough cameras, it should almost be impossible to steal a car.
Right. Right.
Because once
At least in Atlanta.
Exactly. Once that tag is entered on the computer, it's stolen. Unless they take the tag off or whatever, boom, there's an alert. And that alert, and there's kinks in it because cars get stolen all the time. But when they really, really magnify it down and get this thing perfected, once that happens, that car should get tracked everywhere and it should get stopped. Meaning that there should be no way it should be able to get away. Now, we know, I think the problem is some people have access to flocks, some don't if they're not monitoring it or whatever. When we first started experimenting with it, I had deputies, okay, hey, I need you to monitor these flocks and wait until you get a stolen car and be ready to go. Meaning I wanted to know every time a stolen car entered my county, and we're on it. Because we want to send a message: if you steal a car, don't drive to Clayton County. But you got to understand, you got to have people who have access to flock on the road, ready to go. And then you need to set it up, and really that's almost like 24/7. Okay, but once that gets narrowed down, it should almost be impossible for a person to steal a car and move anywhere where there's a flock camera. Right. And that day is coming. But to just say, okay, well, put a tag in there because, hey, you know what? I think my, I want to know where my son's at or whatever. Well, give me the tag. Well, he went over there. Now, if your son is legitimately missing, he's a missing person, and he's seen in that car, and there's a report. No one's seen him in a few days. Well, then that's something that should be in it. Where was this car last seen? Because that can help us find him. But just to say, hey, I want to know what my son's doing. Can you enter him in that system you got? Yeah. He went down there. Okay, thank you.
Right.
That's where we get into this area that's unconstitutional and wrong on so many levels. And you don't know how that can end up. A confrontation where someone could get hurt, could get killed because they were given information that they should have never had access to. Let me tell you something. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've had someone call me up, a civilian. I had a person call me from South Carolina and say, hey, listen, are you able to run a tag? What do you mean am I able to run a tag? Any cop can run a tag. What are you talking about? Right. I mean, can you run a tag in South Carolina? Why are you asking me that? Well, there's a suspicious car outside my house. Well, call the police. They'll run it for you.
Right.
Right. Well, it turns out they were really trying to check on someone they were dating. And of course, they got cussed out and hung up on.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised how many people, if they got a friend who's a cop, hey, can you run a tag for me? Yeah. And then I think you'd be surprised how many dummies will actually do it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
I've been asked a number of times, and that was a no. I think that the other part of Tommy G's video, and I think I got this right, was the secret headquarters part. And it doesn't prove what you might think it proves. So Tommy and his crew tracked down flock facilities, okay? They filmed employees. They photographed license plates. They repeatedly told people you're under surveillance. And part of the point was, how does it feel when somebody watches you? That was the point. I understand what he was doing, and I guess that makes great YouTube videos. But here's the obvious story and irony of it. A surveillance company doesn't like strangers showing up and filming around its facilities. But let's separate the entertainment from the evidence that they got, all right? A company controlling access to its workplace doesn't prove its technology violates your rights. And that's what he was trying to do. And employees can have legitimate security concerns. You can criticize Flock's privacy practices without pretending those two things are legally identical. And the same applies to photographing employees' license plates. it makes the viewers think, wow, oh my goodness, this is so bad. And, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. And I don't know if that is the constitutional test we should be doing. I just think it made it for great entertainment, but it's not proving where he just missed the mark on that. And it just puts a nefarious tone on the flock safety. And
Well, again, he's a YouTuber and he has to give a certain amount of. I'm not trying to justify or whatever, but he's an entertainer.
Right.
I mean, right. I mean, he's also documenting stuff. It also there's some form of entertainment in order to get views and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you're right. But sometimes the entertainment can give a false perception.
Yeah,
and it's
and
a great line. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought his investigation was strongest when he stayed focused on the systems.
Exactly.
And it just fell apart and became weakest when the story became, let's make flock employees uncomfortable.
Yeah, which that's ridiculous.
And,
right.
And it's just, he's a very successful YouTuber, and I understand that, But he also, Tommy polled his audience, and I want to talk about that too.
Okay.
And the response was kind of overwhelming. And what it really turned out was it was more than 90% was opposed to some of the polling he cited, and this is what it sounded like. He was making it seem like America's spoken about, flock. And I was like, not exactly. You think about who is answering it. It's people following a creator who just published a story questioning mass surveillance. What do you think they're going to go ahead and say?
Right.
You know what I mean? They're following you. They agree with you.
If
that's
flock
not a scientific
is used
poll.
correctly, everybody wants a flock system.
Right.
Everybody would love to have flock on their street, especially if you had problems with burglaries. That meant that nobody could drive down that street and drive out without being recorded.
Right.
Right. And that means that you're not just checking for a girlfriend or something. You're checking, hey, a crime occurred between this hour and this hour. How many cars went in and out? Let me give you a good example. We put a flock system by the jail on purpose. And I'll never forget this. When that incident happened and I was coming out of office, which is a whole different story, all of a sudden drugs started going in and out of the jail. Mm-hmm. And I remember calling a dummy who's the sheriff now and saying, listen, you should be able to catch these people bringing drugs in the jail. Don't you have flock cameras? And the answer I got was, well, a lot of cars come in and out of the jail. A lot of cars come in 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. All you got to do is check the cameras and see what cars left and came between the time that the folks ran and threw the drugs over the gate. Mm-hmm. And you got the people who doing it. And the phone went blank and never heard nothing from it again, which is very, very questionable. But when they're put in certain situations, nobody should be able to drive drugs in there or not. So here's the crazy part. When law enforcement have flock, what are they using it for?
Right.
Okay. The sheriff's office I'm talking about is proving that they're running it to see what girls are doing. But you got a flock camera right there by the jail. So how possibly can someone come there and do a night drop without getting caught by that camera? So you're not checking for that, but you're checking for this. And that's where it takes leadership and some good rules and parameters. But anybody with any common sense, everybody wants flock because I don't care who you are. If you have a small child and he got kidnapped and someone said, hey, I saw the car. I didn't get the whole tag, but I got the first 3 letters. Well, you can put that in flock. And every car with those first 3 letters in that particular area is going to come. So who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want law enforcement to be able to figure out the car that abducted their child or abducted their grandmother or whatever? So, if
somebody has dementia,
exactly.
A 6-year-old grandson getting abducted. I mean, you got these alerts, right? Amber alerts.
A drive-by shooting.
Sure.
And one of your relatives, someone you care about, just got shot. Mm-hmm. And they're in the car. You can't do a drive-by shooting unless you're in the car. Mm-hmm. And now you got a camera that can catch them and know what direction they're going in. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I think right. And that's important to note because Tommy did identify legitimate problems. He showed why unrestricted surveillance power deserves scrutiny. But
Right.
he highlighted these abuse. He forced people to think about something most drivers probably never notice sitting beside the road.
Right.
And that's valuable journalism. But I think the investigation stopped one layer too early because I'm less worried about whether a camera sees my license plate than I am about these matters, like who can go ahead and type the plate into a computer. Why are they searching it? Or, how many times, what jurisdiction did they get this document from? Things of that nature. But the good overweighs the bad.
It definitely overweighs the bad, and the bad can easily be controlled.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, okay, if Flock has an alert because that tag comes back to a missing person or a stolen car or whatever, okay, that is very organic. If you're putting a tag in, as long as you're putting it in with a case number, the report that goes with it to show why you're putting it in, we had a kidnapping, this is the tag, we need to check Flock, fine. But if you're just putting a tag in with no explanation, with no case number, or whatever, well, then that's how you catch these rogue officers and
Right.
get rid of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where we land this plane, because it's the people who we trust to use it properly is using these powerful tools to go ahead and they misuse the public's trust. And this is where we have videos and debates. Power is seductive, and these individuals are using it for nefarious reasons. And then we have, a whole bunch of constitutional questions that come out of that.
Absolutely.
But the responsibility comes right back to the agencies, the policies, the misuse of those. It is not the apparatus itself.
Absolutely.
People control those apparatuses. So that's
Absolutely.
where we land this plane
and
today.
we'll land it with this. You said something about power being seductive. You're very, very correct. But always remember this: power doesn't change anyone; it just enhances who they already are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They were a stalker before. They just got, I got a tool. I can stalk better.
Right.
Exactly.
And now I want Hill Nation to answer one question. And I want to make this very specific. Police can use Flock to locate an abducted child, but the same system could potentially be abused by an officer looking for somebody that has no legitimate reason to track them. Would you allow cameras in your community if every search was audited? Yes or no? And tell me why. So I'm Jerome Hill. With me is retired Sheriff Victor Hill, and we will see you in the next episode.
This is the Hill of Justice.